Mindjacked. Chapter 1. The sleek glass and metal exterior of the Neurologic Lab's research facility glinted in the morning sun. Inside, Dr. Samira Khan hurried through the pristine white corridors, eager to get started on the day's experiments. As one of Neurologic's leading neuroscientists, Samira was on the cutting edge of memory manipulation research. Today, she and her team were testing an experimental device that could record and transmit memories. The implications were enormous, from revolutionizing education to helping Alzheimer's patients. However, Samira knew they were venturing into ethically ambiguous territory. Memories shaped individuals. What right did they have to alter them? Pushing the thought aside, Samira entered the lab. Her research partner Raj was already prepping the prototype memory device, carefully arranging electrodes on a test subject's head. "Ready when you are," Raj said, giving a thumbs up. The monitors tracking neural activity sprang to life as Raj switched on the machine. Samira activated the memory transmission sequence. "Commencing test run now." At first, the graphs displayed predictable patterns. Then suddenly, the lines went haywire. "What's going on?" Samira frowned. "Are you getting this?" "I see it too," Raj replied. "Massive spikes in hippocampal regions. This data makes no sense." Samira tried adjusting the machine to decode the signals. An image slowly materialized on the holo screen, a little girl blowing out birthday candles. But it wasn't from their test subject's memory. This was something new. "Where's this coming from?" Raj muttered. Another vision flashed of a man in military uniform, someone else's memory rising unbidden. Samira's scientific curiosity battled with unease. This went beyond expectations. She didn't know how, but random memories had begun cascading through unknown minds. Chapter 2. Samira rubbed her temples as she exited Neurologic Labs that evening, the anomalous memory data still troubling her. She'd always been a workaholic, but recently other priorities in life had taken precedence. She was hoping to have a nice dinner with her boyfriend Ben after the day's exhausting experiments, provided she could focus. She found Ben waiting outside the restaurant they had planned to visit. "Hey babe, how'd it go today?" he asked, greeting her with a light kiss. "Not as expected," Samira sighed. She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal given the project's classified nature. Ben gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Let's talk inside over some wine. I'm sure you've been overthinking all afternoon." Samira smiled gratefully. Ben knew her so well. She resolved to set aside her worries for the night and enjoy this well-deserved time together. Over some delicious Indian food, she gradually relaxed, telling Ben about her family back home and funny workplace stories. She purposefully avoided mentioning the day's events, not wanting to ruin the evening. "Feel better?" Ben asked gently as he walked her to the car, refusing to let Samira get in one more minute of overtime. "Much," she said. "I guess I've been stressed lately, especially with..." Suddenly, a vision flashed through Samira's mind of walking down the aisle in a white gown. For a split second, she actually felt she was the woman in this foreign memory, not herself. "Samira, you okay?" Ben's concerned face came back into focus. "Yeah, just tired, I guess," Samira muttered, unsettled. She hadn't told Ben anything about the memory experiments. So where had this vivid scene come from? Chapter 3. Over the next few days, strange memory flashes grew distressingly frequent for Samira. While cooking breakfast, she would abruptly experience a snippet of someone else's vacation. During a meeting, she found herself standing in a stranger's classroom, taking an exam she had never seen. Each immersive episode felt temporarily real until fading like waking from an intense dream. At neurologic, more peculiar neural signals indicated the phenomenon was escalating. Samira knew they had to act quickly before things spiraled. If random memories were bleeding into the public, the implications for identity and mass consciousness could be catastrophic. Samira called an emergency meeting with Neurologic's directors. "Our memory tech appears to be interacting with people's minds in unforeseen ways," she explained urgently. "Somehow, we've enabled individuals to share memories without consent across vast distances. The longer we wait, the more chaos it will cause." The board members murmured anxiously. This was an unprecedented crisis no one knew how to handle. "What's your proposal?" the chairman asked. The others looked to Samira expectantly, recognizing she had the best grasp on the situation. Samira took a deep breath. "For now, we try containing it discreetly before word spreads, identify potential vectors, and firewall the memory signals. Meanwhile, Raj and I will devote all our efforts into finding the source." The directors agreed and dispersed. Raj came up to Samira anxiously. "Do you really think we can keep this secret for long? The media will have a field day once memories start crossing borders." Samira bit her lip. "I know, but we have to try. Global hysteria benefits no one. Let's work quickly before this gets out of hand." Raj nodded nervously before returning to his computer to start compiling data. Samira gazed out the window as people bustled along the streets below, blissfully unaware of the looming crisis. For their sake, she had to maintain control, at least for now. Chapter 4. Over the next few weeks, Samira became consumed with researching the mysterious memory breaches, often spending all night in the lab analyzing data. Her single-minded focus put strain on her relationships as she turned down invitations from Ben and friends to keep working. "I'm worried about you," Ben said one evening when Samira begged off dinner yet again. "You're obsessed over this project. Is everything okay?" "It's just a time crunch at work, that's all," Samira said evasively. She knew Ben meant well, but he couldn't understand. This phenomenon threatened the world. She had to devote every minute to finding answers before it was too late. Privately, Samira questioned if she was doing the right thing keeping Ben in the dark. He believed Neurologic was researching ways to improve memory. But revealing people's minds were randomly melding went against confidentiality agreements. The spread seemed contained for now. Samira prayed it stayed that way. At the lab, Samira pored tirelessly over global neural data, analyzing activation patterns. There had to be clues that would explain why strangers were sharing memories and sensations. She was so engrossed she didn't hear Raj enter. "Samira, you need to see this," he said anxiously. He pulled up a map tracking live psychic signals that were appearing everywhere from London to Tokyo. "It's no use containing it. This is going exponential." Samira's throat tightened. She felt the situation spiraling out of control as more minds experienced realities not their own. What had her research unleashed upon the world? "There might be a ray of hope," Raj continued. "I was collating energy signals and traced the source here." He pointed to a remote village in northern China. "I think patient zero is somewhere inside." Samira clenched her fists. If they could find the original transmitter, maybe they could stop this before mankind's collective consciousness unraveled. Chapter 5. Samira knew that locating Patient Zero in a remote Asian village was their only hope of containing the deepening memory crisis. She quickly assembled a covert ops team, including Raj, neuroscience expert Dr. Suzuki, and ex-military contractor Jiang for protection. Haste was critical, who knew how far the memory contagion had spread already. Arriving in China, their team was greeted by General Yang, an aging officer in the People's Liberation Army. Samira noted his posture was stiff, expression uneasy. "General Yang, thank you for permitting us access," Samira said politely, hoping to get straight to business locating the memory source. "Can you transport us to these coordinates where we detected the psychic imprints?" "There's been a complication with your request," the general said slowly. "Regarding the patient you're searching for." Samira exchanged anxious glances with her team. She knew something had gone wrong. The general clasped his hands behind his back. "A year ago, we became aware of a woman in a nearby village who could project her memories into people's minds, remarkable but dangerous ability." He nodded to an aide who opened a surveillance file, showing a grainy video of an aged woman surrounded by startled villagers, some crying or clutching their heads. "We intervened and contained her, studying how she could transmit thoughts. Our technicians tapped into her gifts to try developing psychic technology for China's benefit." General Yang sighed regretfully. "It seems your device interacted with our subject, amplifying her powers worldwide. What you detected originated here." Samira reeled in dismay. The spread was her team's fault, not some random mutation. But she couldn't dwell on that now. "General, you have to let us access her immediately," Samira implored. "She's the focal point. If we can isolate her signal, we can terminate the cascades globally before more minds are overwhelmed." The general considered silently before giving a curt nod. "You have 3 days, but after that, my superiors decide her fate." Samira agreed anxiously. Lives depended on them finding Patient Zero in time. Chapter 6. Back in the privacy of their temporary quarters, Samira's team prepared to track down Patient Zero. They had mere days before the Chinese government took over the search. "Any ideas where we start?" Dr. Suzuki asked, studying a map of the vast rural area. "They've likely got her hidden away somewhere remote." Raj was already scanning for networks and energy signals that might indicate a secret facility. "I can try tapping local systems, but security here is tight. If I dig too deep, they'll notice." Samira pondered their options. The general clearly knew more than he had revealed. She decided on an alternative, riskier plan. "I think I'll pay another visit to General Yang," she announced. "Get a better sense of who we're dealing with." When Samira returned to headquarters, however, she was greeted by a very different reception. Armed guards blocked her way as technicians rummaged through the team's equipment. "What's going on?" Samira demanded. General Yang approached sternly. "We detected attempts to access classified networks from your quarters. You know we can't allow that." Samira fumed silently. Raj was too bold for his own good sometimes. "Until your systems have been swept, your team must remain in its quarters," the general continued. "We can't risk leaks when national security is at stake." With that, Samira found herself escorted firmly back across the compound, the guards clearly unwilling to indulge further discussion. Back in their room, Raj looked embarrassed. "Yeah, they caught me poking around, but I did get something useful." He pulled out a crumpled printout. This references a place called Mandala, maybe the name of their secret base. Could help narrow our search when we finally get out of here. Samira clapped Raj on the shoulder. Nice work. We'll start investigating as soon as we're clear. She just prayed they could escape confinement before their window closed. Chapter 7. 2 days had already passed and Samira's team was still stuck at headquarters, the general extending their detention indefinitely. Samira's frustration mounted. This obstruction could cost millions their sanity if Patient Zero wasn't isolated soon. Finally, permission came to access their equipment again under strict oversight. Raj quickly picked up chatter on public forums referencing Mindjacked. The name was linked to posts about people's minds being hacked, thoughts manipulated. I don't think the Chinese control Patient Zero anymore, Raj murmured to Samira. This Mindjacked group might have infiltrated and taken over her gifts. We could be dealing with psychic exploitation. Samira's pulse quickened. An underground collective weaponizing mental transfers could bring unimaginable chaos. Who knew what their motives were? We have to get access ourselves, Samira whispered back. She trusted General Yang less by the minute. They got their chance 2 mornings later. When a perimeter alarm mysteriously went off, drawing the guards away, Samira and Raj slipped outside. Which way? Raj asked breathlessly. Samira considered the little intel they had. She pointed towards some low hills shrouded in mist. If I had a psychic superweapon, that's where I'd hide it. They trekked for hours through the rugged terrain. Samira was about to suggest turning back when a strange vision struck her senses. A room filled with cryo-chambers emitting an eerie glow. Do you see that? Raj asked in awe. Samira realized he must be sharing her mental glimpse. It's got to be close. Samira picked up her pace, nearly running. The visions meant Patient Zero was reaching out, whether voluntarily or not. Samira didn't notice the security drone keeping watch overhead. In a monitoring room far away, faceless technicians observed their unauthorized movements, murmuring that 2 refugees were headed straight for the hive. Chapter 8. Samira and Raj pressed on towards the coordinates Samira guessed held Patient Zero, relying on her erratic psychic visions. The rocky path took them into a secluded valley surrounded by sheer cliffs. Raj paused anxiously. You sure this is the right way? Feels like we're walking straight into a trap. We don't have a choice. This is our only lead, Samira insisted, fighting her own doubts. Each passing hour brought the world closer to the brink as Patient Zero's powers expanded unchecked. Her visions grew more vivid and frequent, projected memories of this secret location flashing choppily as stark white halls, locked metal doors, clawing desperation. Samira wondered if these were Patient Zero's own thoughts and feelings bleeding through, revealing her imprisonment. The rocky trail terminated abruptly at a sheer rock wall. Samira's watch suddenly glitched, the display going haywire. Some kind of signal scrambler? Raj wondered aloud. He reached out a hand and gasped as it passed straight through what moments before had looked like solid stone. A hologram shell hiding the real base. Samira took a deep breath. Ready for this? Raj gave a tight nod, and they stepped forward in unison. For a moment, there was only darkness. Then blinding light enveloped them, revealing a gleaming corridor lined with armed soldiers. A man in a suit stepped forward, the same one who had observed them on the security feed. He gave a cold smile. You've saved us a lot of effort. We were preparing an extraction team to go collect your rogue psychic, but like moths to a flame, you came right to us instead. Realization dawned on Samira of just how badly they had erred. Your mind sight, she asked faintly. In the flesh, your talents will integrate quite nicely with our collection. He gestured, and shockingly powerful hands seized Samira and Raj, dragging them down the hall towards the cryo chambers Samira had mentally glimpsed. She had walked them right into the very trap she had been trying to prevent. Their only hope now lay in waiting for the right opening to escape, and somehow still reach patient zero in time. Chapter 9. Samira sat tensely in the stark white holding cell, struggling to formulate an escape plan. Next to her, Raj looked drained as he continued trying unsuccessfully to hack the door codes. I'm so sorry for getting us into this, Samira said miserably. We should have turned back. Raj shook his head. Your call got us this far. We just had to find a way out, so it wasn't for nothing. Samira managed a small, grateful smile. Ever the optimist. She wondered if the rest of her team had realized yet that she and Raj were missing. Even if they did, there was little hope of mounting a rescue operation in time. Her thoughts were interrupted by the cell door sliding abruptly open. The lead mind sight agent stood there looking smug. Time to harvest your memory data, he announced. Just think of it as a donation to the cause. As they were forced down the hall toward an operating room, Samira weighed her options. She lacked Raj's technical skills to hack security systems. Her best bet was some kind of psychological persuasion, to get them to lower their guard. She faked a stumble, crying out in pain. When the guard grabbed her arm to steady her, Samira dropped her full weight, using leverage to flip him off balance. She sprinted down the hall before anyone could react. Alarms immediately began blaring, but the head start gave Samira precious time. She pried open a ventilation duct just big enough to crawl through while scrambling footsteps approached. It wasn't much of a plan, but at least she was free, for now. Samira crawled on elbows and knees through the claustrophobic metal passages. She just needed to stay ahead of pursuers until she could find a way to reach patient zero. Samira knew her chances were slim, but she had to try with so much at stake. Pausing at a vent, she glimpsed white coats prepping a cryopod below. The sight steeled Samira's resolve. She would get out of this place or die trying. Chapter 10. Crawling blindly through the maze of air ducts, Samira struggled to formulate a strategy beyond just escaping capture. She had no idea how to deactivate the psychic equipment controlling patient zero. She wasn't even sure what the true scope of Mindsight's plans were. Clearly no one would be harvesting her memories today. Samira paused as the clanging of the duct around her abruptly ceased. Voices echoed up from some large chamber below. She peered cautiously through the vent. A crowd of people in dark clothing stood conferring around a high-tech command station. Samira recognized the Mindsight leader addressing what appeared to be fellow members. Exploitation of the Asia specimen has been most fruitful, he proclaimed. We've kept it hidden in the hive under pretense of a virus quarantine. No one suspects our control as we condition human consciousness. Murmurs of approval rippled through the watching collective. Samira felt her blood turn cold. These people saw human minds as livestock to cultivate. The time has come to expand, their leader continued. We'll deploy additional towers at these locations, tapping major urban neural networks. A hologram map materialized showing target cities like New York, London, Mumbai. Samira clutched the vent in dismay. Millions more would be drawn into this psychic web soon, manipulated into believing and doing whatever mind sight desired. She had to find some way to stop them. A sudden whirring made her duck back into the shadows. A surveillance drone was combing through the duct system, likely trying to flush her out. She crawled away quickly before it detected her. As Samira descended deeper into the hive, she considered her predicament. Going public was her only play, risky as it was. If she could leak evidence of Mindsight's plans, authorities would have to shut them down. Now she just had to find an exit and way to transmit the data. Ahead, a faint daylight glowed through a grate. Hope surged in Samira's chest. It might lead outside where she could get a message out, if she could evade security patrols long enough. This nightmare wasn't over yet, but finally she had a real chance to expose the truth. Chapter 11. Samira pried open the dusty ventilation grate, emerging into a narrow canyon that appeared deserted for now. Hugging the stone walls, she crept towards daylight, praying her escape hadn't been detected yet. Her heart pounded as Samira picked her way through the ravine towards a distant road. So close to getting word out about Mindsight's sinister psychic exploitation plot. She just had to reach. "Don't move." The cold voice behind made her freeze. Slowly, Samira turned to see the Mindsight commander emerging with a dozen soldiers, weapons leveled. "I'll admit, you prove surprisingly elusive," he said. "But this chase ends now." Samira stood paralyzed as they closed in. Without warning, a deafening roar echoed through the canyon. A black military chopper rose from concealment, rotors whipping Samira's hair violently. She shielded her eyes against the barrage of dust. When it cleared, the soldiers all lay unconscious on the ground. The Mindsight commander had vanished. Shocked, Samira looked up as a rope ladder unfurled in front of her. Rod's grinning face appeared at the bay door, offering her a hand up. "Need a lift?" Samira laughed in dizzying relief. "Am I glad to see you?" As they gained altitude, Raj explained he'd escaped during the chaos of her getaway and managed to sneak a warning message to their extraction team about what Mindsight had planned. For once, everything had aligned perfectly. "Did you secure their intel?" Samira yelled over the chopper noise. "Every last byte," Raj confirmed. "We'll decrypt it en route. Should provide plenty of evidence to shut them down for good." Samira sat back, finally allowing herself to breathe. The threat wasn't neutralized yet, but with this data, she could finally blow the whistle on Mindsight's dangers to the world. Back at headquarters, Samira prepared to transmit the evidence exposing Mindsight globally. Raj had decrypted reams of data on their true scope and motives. She contacted a group of trusted journalist colleagues, asking them to disseminate the revelations immediately before authorities could try blocking it. Within hours, headlines everywhere blared news of the shadowy group that had hijacked a psychic phenomenon to secretly manipulate minds. There was uproar and panic, but also hope that this meant the terrifying memory breaches could finally be stopped. General Yun confronted them, flustered. "You should have come to us first before going public," he scolded. "Now you've created chaos." "Your censorship would have buried this," Samira said coldly. "People deserve the truth." Public outcry quickly forced officials to shut down Mindsight's operations however they could. Their team joined the coordinated effort, eager to disable the program at its source that had caused so much suffering. It took years of tireless effort and collaboration, but finally the mysterious memory breaches that had threatened humanity's collective psyche ceased, unlocking minds that had been unknowingly imprisoned. With mind sight gone, Samira was free to focus her research on regenerating shattered memories and providing closure. There was so much healing still needed, but the relief of being freed from that invisible coercion made the future feel full of hope again. Chapter 12. In the aftermath of exposing mind sight, Samira tried returning to some semblance of normal life. The media storm had died down, but she remained haunted by how much her project had spiraled out of control before she could intervene. Tonight she was having dinner with Ben, looking forward to reconnecting after being apart so long. She knew he must have endless questions about where she had disappeared to for weeks. Ben's concern was evident as she recapped a partial version of events, omitting classified details. "I can't imagine what that was like," he said. "I'm glad you weren't hurt, but I hope you'll be more careful with your research going forward." Samira nodded mutely, recognizing the wisdom in his words. She had been reckless with mysteries beyond her comprehension. The road ahead looked very different now. "Enough about me," Samira deflected. "How have you been holding up these past few months?" "It's been a challenge," Ben admitted. "Distant memories kept popping up that I knew weren't mine. Made it really hard to focus on work or anything." Samira squeezed his hand in sympathy. She could only imagine how traumatic experiencing others' pasts must have been. "I'm so sorry you went through that, but I promise it's over now." Ben smiled. "I know, I'm just glad you were able to stop it. What you did was important. Even if there were mistakes made, I'm proud of you." His unconditional support meant the world to Samira. She had missed this, the comfort of being with someone who knew her completely. Whatever came next, she vowed not to let her ambitions overwhelm what mattered. Chapter 13. At Neurologic's first major press conference since the mind sight controversy, reporters clamored with demands for Samira to explain how such disaster had happened on her watch. She stepped up to face the cameras bravely. "Our memory manipulation research clearly had unintended consequences that changed many lives," Samira acknowledged. "I take full responsibility for misjudging the risks involved. All I can do now is devote myself completely to helping those affected recover." She outlined Neurologic's plans for memory regeneration therapy and counseling services funded by their substantial profits. It was nowhere near enough, but a start. Watching proudly from the wings, Raj gave Samira an approving nod. They had prepared extensively to get ahead of the public outrage and restore trust. She was doing wonderfully, staying calm under fire. One particularly zealous journalist kept pressing Samira about whether psychological damage from the memory breaches was reversible. Samira chose her words carefully. "The human mind has a remarkable capacity to heal if given the appropriate support. Our dream therapy technology can gently guide reconciliation between real and implanted memories without additional trauma." In truth, Samira still harbored private doubts about whether mental restoration was fully possible. But instilling hope felt necessary during such vulnerability. She could only take this one step at a time. The reporter refused to let up until the moderators cut him off. Samira stood tall throughout the onslaught, knowing that she deserved the anger. If enduring the brunt of the backlash now helped restore faith in Neurologic's mission, then it was worth it. When the conference finally ended, Samira retreated to her office, exhausted. Raj looked at her with concern when she emerged later, composed again, but shoulders sagging. "I know that was brutal, but you handled it so well," he said. "We're going to get through this." Samira offered a tired smile. "We have to," she agreed. "We can't let our mistake create more." Chapter 14. In the weeks following the explosive press conference, Samira buried herself in work developing Neurologic's memory reparations initiatives. She met frequently with psychiatrists, therapists, and AI specialists to design a comprehensive recovery program integrating therapy, neural stimulation, and controlled memory overrides. Progress was slow, but Samira refused to cut corners again. Each tiny breakthrough toward unraveling and reintegrating cognitive dissonance felt like a small redemption. Late one night, as Samira was leaving the office, she noticed the light still on in Raj's station. She poked her head in to check on him. "You're working too hard," she admonished. "Go home and see your family." Raj rubbed his eyes wearily. "I just keep thinking if I crunch the data from different angles, I'll find the variable we missed." Samira touched his shoulder. "What happened wasn't your fault. All we can do now is fix it together, the right way." Raj looked at her for a long moment. "You're right," he sighed. "I wish I had your wisdom back when we started this whole thing. Maybe we could have avoided this mess." "Hey, we were both too eager and reckless," Samira said. "But we've learned. That's what matters." She bid Raj goodnight, heart heavy as she left. They carried equal parts guilt, but the public laid blame solely at her feet. Samira couldn't deny the unfairness stung, but she had to keep looking forward. Arriving home, she noticed a light blinking with a missed call from Ben. Samira winced, realizing she had been ignoring him again these past weeks. She resolved to be better. He deserved that much. Pressing Ben's contact, Samira hesitated just a moment before hitting call. She owed him honesty, however difficult. Their relationship would have to adapt or end if she couldn't balance priorities again. Either way, it was a conversation that could be put off no longer. Chapter 15. Talking to Ben had been every bit as hard as Samira expected. Understandably, he was deeply hurt by her neglect since the Mindjacked mission. She explained again how consumed she had become trying to atone for her mistakes. "I know you're trying to fix things, and I'm proud of you for that," Ben had said. "But I can't simply wait around indefinitely for your attention either." They agreed to take some time apart while Samira got back on track. She understood his perspective intellectually, but emotionally, the perceived abandonment stung. Throwing herself harder into work was Samira's coping mechanism. She helped Raj gather the brightest psychology experts to form their new memory integration bureau. Their goal was customizing treatment regimens combining techniques from hypnotherapy to targeted neural overrides that could step-by-step unpack tangled memories. It was a monumental challenge, but one Samira could not afford to fail. Late one evening, Raj appeared at her office door looking concerned. "Go home, Samira. This will all be here tomorrow." Samira shook her head wearily. "Every minute I'm not working feels like a minute I'm failing those who are still lost out there. I owe them more." Raj's voice softened with sympathy. "You're only one person. Everyone needs rest, even you." Samira looked down at her shaking hands, realizing just how much this endless fight was taking out of her. Could she really serve anyone effectively in this condition? "You've got a point," she admitted with a tired exhale. "I'll head home for tonight, but we dive back in first thing tomorrow." Agreed. Raj smiled. Absolutely. Samira switched off her monitors, feeling the weight of exhaustion finally hit. She had a duty to carry on, just not to the detriment of her own health. With time and care, healing was possible for everyone affected. She just needed to believe that. Chapter 16. Samira heard the knock at her door as she was brewing her morning tea. She opened it cautiously, surprised to see Sebastian Carter standing there looking anxious. The billionaire tech investor had helped fund Neurologic's memory research in the past, though they'd had a falling out after the mine site disaster. Mr. Carter, to what do I owe the visit? Samira asked coolly. Dr. Khan, thank goodness. Do you have a moment? There's something urgent I need to discuss. Samira reluctantly let him inside. She listened suspiciously as Carter described receiving threats from a group claiming to have a dangerous new psychic technology. They said if I don't hand over an obscene investment, they'll test this mental weapon in a major city, Carter said miserably. I thought your expertise could help counteract it before lives are at risk again. Samira's expression hardened. It sounded suspiciously like blackmail, using her own fears against her. I should think you'd have ample resources of your own to pursue this lead without needing my involvement, she said coldly. Carter wrung his hands fretfully. Please, Dr. Khan, I realize I have no right to ask for your help after the way we left things, but innocent people will suffer if this threat is real. We need to work together. Samira weighed her options. As much as she distrusted Carter, she couldn't ignore possible danger either. Until she knew more, perhaps a temporary alliance was warranted. Reluctantly, she nodded. I make no promises, but I'll look into your claims. Carter's posture sagged with relief. Thank you, Doctor. You have my utmost discretion. After he left, Samira placed an urgent call to Raj to have him quietly investigate Carter's story. If this was some kind of trap to embroil Neurologic again, she would see through it. But if lives truly were endangered, it was her duty to intervene. For now, she had no choice but to work with Carter carefully. Chapter 17. At first, Sebastian Carter seemed true to his word about discreetly tracking down the psychic threat. Samira remained guarded, but helped him gather intel to identify the extortionists. Given Neurologic's vast resources and connections, they quickly uncovered leads pointing to a mysterious group called Red Symphony based in Eastern Europe. Late one night, Samira got an urgent call from Carter. I've booked us flights to Romania, he said. Informants confirmed that's Red Symphony's hub of operations. Samira hesitated. Shouldn't we coordinate with authorities? No time, Carter insisted. This group could activate its weapon any moment. We need to infiltrate directly before it's too late. Reluctantly, Samira agreed to the reckless plan, hoping she wasn't making another grave mistake. She couldn't let more innocent minds be harmed if there was any way to prevent it. They landed in Bucharest and followed clues leading towards the rural Carpathian Mountains. Carter had acquired a military-grade neural disruptor he claimed could disable psychic manipulations. Where did you get this? Samira asked uneasily. Old contacts from my hardware development days, Carter said evasively. Nothing illegal, I assure you. Samira wasn't convinced, but they were in too deep to turn back now. At last, a hidden cave entrance revealed itself. Carter brandished his disruptor as they crept inside. The narrow stone corridor opened into a vast cavern filled with massive cryptic machinery. Awaiting them was the mine site director himself, smiling coldly. "Welcome. We've been expecting you." Samira whirled accusingly on Carter. He responded by aiming the disruptor at her forehead. "So sorry, Doctor, but your talents are needed here now." Horror washed over her as Carter's betrayal became clear. She had foolishly trusted him right into another trap. Chapter 18. Samira sat tensely in the stark white holding cell, struggling to formulate an escape plan. Next to her, Raj looked drained as he continued trying unsuccessfully to hack the door codes. "I'm so sorry for getting us into this," Samira said miserably. "We should have turned back." Raj shook his head. "Your call got us this far. We just had to find a way out, so it wasn't for nothing." Samira managed a small, grateful smile. Ever the optimist. She wondered if the rest of her team had realized yet that she and Raj were missing. Even if they did, there was little hope of mounting a rescue operation in time. Her thoughts were interrupted by the cell door sliding abruptly open. The lead MindSight agent stood there looking smug. "Time to harvest your memory data," he announced. "Just think of it as a donation to the cause." As they were forced down the hall toward an operating room, Samira weighed her options. She lacked Raj's technical skills to hack security systems. Her best bet was some kind of psychological persuasion, get them to lower their guard. She faked a stumble, crying out in pain. When the guard grabbed her arm to steady her, Samira dropped her full weight, using leverage to flip him off balance. She sprinted down the hall before anyone could react. Alarms immediately began blaring, but the head start gave Samira precious time. She pried open a ventilation duct just big enough to crawl through while scrambling footsteps approached. It wasn't much of a plan, but at least she was free, for now. Samira crawled on elbows and knees through the claustrophobic metal passages. She just needed to stay ahead of pursuers until she could find a way to reach patient zero. Samira knew her chances were slim, but she had to try with so much at stake. Pausing at a vent, she glimpsed white coats prepping a cryopod below. The sight steeled Samira's resolve. She would get out of this place or die trying. Chapter 19. Samira had lost track of time, crawling through the endless air ducts. Periodically, she would peer through vents trying to gauge her location, but saw only machinery and researchers running tireless tests on memory manipulation tech. She was totally turned around in the maze with no real exit plan. Samira's limbs ached and she was desperately thirsty. But she refused to let despair overtake her. Raj was depending on her, as were all those who would suffer if MindSight unlocked the secrets of weaponizing memory. She had to keep fighting. As she rested a moment, Samira heard faint voices approaching from down a side tunnel. Cautiously, she peered through the grate as two researchers in white coats strolled below. "The ISO chambers are almost at full psychic amplification," one said excitedly. "We'll be ready for field tests soon." "And the girl," his colleague asked. "Has she stabilized?" The first man checked a chart. "Vitals seem good. We'll stem test her integration tonight." Samira's eyes widened in realization they had to be discussing patient zero. If she could just follow them to the source. Adrenaline surging, Samira crawled quickly down the duct the researchers had emerged from. It angled steadily downward until the air tasted dank and cool. The duct walls here glinted strangely, etched with some kind of metallic alloy. Defenses against psychic leakage. She was close. Samira crept forward until the duct opened into a vast chamber filled with cryopods, including one containing the frail patient she had desperately been seeking. After everything, she had finally found her. Now she just had to figure out how to save her. Chapter 20. Peering down at patient Zero's cryopod from the air ducts, Samira's mind raced, trying to formulate a plan. She was in the hornet's nest now, with no idea how to safely extract someone clearly unstable and dangerous. But she had to try. The world depended on freeing this woman from Mind's sight. She decided her only real option was disguising as a nurse to get access. The researchers she had tailed here seemed to come and go from the ISO chamber freely. Maybe she could blend in if she moved confidently enough. When the room was briefly vacated, Samira dropped down stealthily, swiping a spare hazmat suit and scrub hat sitting by the door. Taking a deep breath, she strode in purposefully like she belonged, until reaching patient Zero's pod. The elderly woman inside seemed frail and lifeless, hooked up to countless wires and tubes. Samira quickly located the emergency release switch. With a hiss of depressurizing air, the pod door lifted open. Alarms immediately began blaring. Samira frantically started disentangling patient Zero from the equipment keeping her comatose, praying the hacked life support wouldn't fail. Weak eyelids fluttered open as Samira helped the feeble woman sit up for the first time in ages. She seemed profoundly disoriented. "It's okay, I'm getting you out of here," Samira said gently. But there was no spark of recognition, just a blank, trusting gaze. Had her mind been damaged by isolation and experiments? There was no time to find out. Throwing patient Zero's arm over her shoulder, Samira dragged her stumbling towards the exit. She had gotten this far by sheer luck, and now came the truly hard part. Chapter 21. Alarms continued blaring as Samira half-carried patient Zero out of the cryo chamber into the winding corridors beyond. The feeble woman could barely stand, let alone walk quickly to escape. Samira prayed they could evade patrols long enough to find an exit. At an intersection, footsteps echoed from both directions. They were surrounded. In desperation, Samira yanked open a storage closet and pulled patient Zero inside just as a troop of guards rushed past. In the musty darkness, Samira tried calming the whimpering woman. "It's going to be okay, I'll get us out of this." She just needed time to think. Exploring the closet, Samira felt cool air blowing from behind a shelving unit. She moved it aside to reveal a ventilation duct, their escape route. "See, we'll crawl to freedom." Helping patient Zero up into the tight space was difficult, but together they managed. Samira hoped the chaos covered their tracks as she dragged her fragile companion through the dusty vents. After an endless crawl, daylight appeared up ahead. The duct led outside to a wooded hillside. Hardly believing their luck, Samira helped lower patient Zero down the steep slope toward the tree line. Reaching the woods safely, Samira allowed herself a moment to rest. But they weren't out of danger yet. Mind's sight would be scouring the area relentlessly for their missing prize asset. Samira pulled out her phone to call Raj, but there was no signal this far from civilization. Their only option was picking a direction and running, hoping to find a road or settlement beyond Mind's sight's reach. Looking at patient Zero's frail form, she knew it wouldn't be easy. But difficult as their path forward remained, the first critical step was done. Against all odds, patient Zero had been freed from her captors. Now Samira had to ensure she stayed that way. Chapter 22. For 3 days, Samira and Patient Zero trekked through remote forest, surviving on wild berries and rainwater. The elderly woman was nearly dead weight, but Samira couldn't bring herself to leave her behind. Their bond had become one of survival. When they finally stumbled onto a dirt road, an overwhelming relief washed over Samira. Civilization meant safety, for now at least. She flagged down a passing farmer for help. Back in the capital, Samira had Raj scan for tracking implants in Patient Zero's body. Amazingly, none were found. Either mind sight had gotten sloppy, or they wanted her unleashed for some darker purpose. Contacts in the Chinese government offered refuge at a secluded mountain estate. "She'll be secure here," the minister assured. "We owe Dr. Khan a great debt." Samira was hesitant to trust officials again, but options were limited with mind sight's reach. She squeezed Patient Zero's hand gently. "You're safe here. I'll come back for you." Returning home should have felt like a triumph, but troubling doubts plagued Samira's mind. She had rescued Patient Zero, so why were reports of memory bleeding worsening? A missing piece remained. While analyzing mindsight data, Samira made an alarming discovery. Patient Zero was no longer the only psychic transmitter. Secret clones had been cultivated using her DNA and were now scattered in urban areas. It explained the escalating memory crisis. Samira knew what had to be done. She rallied her team for a final mission to simultaneously take down the clones before they cascaded into chaos. The fight ahead would be dangerous, but the world's mental freedom depended on it. Samira looked around at the determined faces of those who had stood by her through crisis and controversy when all seemed lost. Together, they would succeed. The end.